We are gathered here in sadness to pay our final respects to Rabbi David Feldman, Rabbi David Michael, and Rabbi Yaakov Moshe. My name is Rabbi Mordechai Feuerstein. I am a mechut of Rabbi David and Aviva Feldman. On behalf of the family, I thank all of you, everyone here, for coming to honor him and to share in our deep grief and sorrow. I'd like to call upon Rabbi Yudin to please come forward for a perikatil.
מכתב לדוד, שמרני אל כי חסיסי בך, אומרת אדוני, אדוני אותו, טובוסי בא לך, לקדושים אשר בארץ המה, וידירי כוכב צבאם, ירבו עצמוסם, אחר מהרו, ועל השיח נזכיה מדום, ועל אסוד אס שמוסם, על ספוסוי, אדוני מנוס אלקי וחוסי, אתה תומך גורלי, חבלים נפלו לי בנימים, אף נחלס שופרו עולי, אברך אס אדוני אשר ירצוני, אף לילוס יסרוני חיליוסוי, שיביסי אדוני לנגדי סוליד, כי מימיני בל אמות, לכן סומך ליבי ויגל כבודי, אף בשורי ישכון לבטח, כי לא תעזוב נפשי לשאול, לא שיתן חסידך לרוס שוחס, תודיעני אורח חיים סובס מחוז, es ponecho neimos bimincho netzach.
We could call upon Rabbi Larry Rothwax.
Mother David, Adonai, Yagor Balecha, Mishkon, Bahar Banshecha, Halech, Tommy Mufal Tzedek, Vidover Emes Bilbao, Lorakal, Alishono, Lo Salary Yura, Karpalon Asa Al Provo, Zebein of Nimas, Vesire Adonai Chabe, Nishban, Loharab, Lo Yamir, Kasbal, Lanasan Beneshech, Vishochai, Lanakilo Lakach, Lo Say Ele, Lo Yimot,
Adonai, ma adam v'tedoehu, ben enosh v'tachshaveh. O Lord, what is man that thou dost think of him? The son of a frail human, that thou hast regard for him. Adam lahevel dom, yom of over. Man is like a breath, his days a passing shadow. Baboker yotzitz v'chalav, lo Ba'erev, Yimolel V'yolesh. In the morning he flourishes and springs up afresh, but by evening he withers and fades. Limno Shomenu King Hoda, V'novi Levav Chachma. So teach us to count our days, that we may attain a heart of wisdom. Hodei Adonai Nefesh Avodov, V'lo Ye'eshmu Kol HaChosim Bo. The Almighty redeems the souls of his servants, and those who take refuge in him will not be condemned. Yoshov He'afor Ala Oretz Kishahoya, V'haruach Toshu El Ha'Elohim Asher Yisrael. When the dust returns to the earth as it was, the spirit returns to the God who gave it. We will now begin the Hespedian eulogies with the children of Daniel Feldman.
Among the many concerns that one has in anticipating the funeral of a parent, I always worried about what would happen if the day of my father's funeral was one of the days, sort of minor holidays, which Jewish law marks as forbidden to engage in hesped, the Hebrew term used for eulogy. Days such as Rosh Chodesh, which took place last week, or Hanukkah, a few weeks away. Funerals on those days often occur with no speeches at all. And I worried about that. Not only out of the fear of depriving my father of such honors, but specifically because of my father's opinion on the matter. He objected to the idea of having no speeches at all, because he felt that there was an important halachic and linguistic distinction between the Hebrew term hesped and the English word eulogy. Drawing on his characteristic linguistic expertise, he would note that hesped, from the word misped, means to speak in a way designed to evoke tears, wailing, and mourning. And that's inappropriate on days designated for happiness. Eulogy, by contrast, comes from the Latin words, meaning good and words, and refers only to the saying of nice things about a person. Even if a hesped is inappropriate to maintain, why should there be no eulogy? So here we are today, and it's actually not one of those days, and yet the distinction is still on my mind, because I feel like my father would still want a eulogy instead of a hesped. Because the last thing he would ever want to do is to make people cry. And he had an endless love for good words. He was all about goodness. He was all about words and the true and lasting goodness that words can do and can bring about. He was a master of language. He actually knew 9 of them, and had a deep appreciation for the power of words to educate, to inspire, to inform, to console, to gladden, to teach, to comfort, to cheer, to edify, and to elevate the world in God's image. He put a different spin on the dictum of the rabbis to speak little and do much. He did more than most of us can ever hope to do. He did many more things through speaking, and with all of his speaking, it was little compared to his doing, because he did so many things for so many people that he never spoke about. During these difficult past few months, we in the family struggled so much with his medical conditions, striving to ensure not only that he would have the best treatment possible, but also that we would take the most appropriate approaches to the issues that came up crucially important to us that the steps taken do justice to his lifelong devotion to the sanctity of life. One of the many topics that permitted his talents and his passions to promoting and to explaining through the prism of Jewish tradition and values. As we strove to honor his legacy these last few months, my brother at one point commented, maybe this is our Meshivas Nefesh. The reference is to a scholarly work that was written by my grandfather, Zichrono Livracha. The book was written over the course of more than 40 years and was still unfinished, as my grandfather, who lived in Los Angeles where my father was born, neared his own last months in 1981. My father, despite having his own full-time rabbinate and literary career, his own family to raise, and living 3,000 miles away in New York, did what he has consistently done throughout his life. Without the slightest hesitation, he made sure that the needs of his family were tended to with love, dignity, and splendor. In this case, working to honor his father's legacy by doing what was necessary to complete the book, to bring it to print, and then to distribute and to promote it, and so much more. No one can ever imagine, and time would not permit me to even share the little that I know, if I had many, many hours, how much of himself he devoted to being there, to provide in every sense of the word, not only for my mother and myself and my siblings, but for each and every member of his extended family, which is no small task considering he was the seventh of 9 children. And he did this while performing magnificent feats as a community rabbi and a world-class scholar. All of this may not seem physically possible, especially while maintaining that famous dazzling smile of his. But that smile was actually the secret. The intense love and care and sensitivity and joy of life that radiated from within and always let you know that somehow everything will be okay. The title of his father's book comes from the verse in the book of Psalms, Torah's Hashem Tamima, God's Torah is perfect, that being the title of an earlier book to which the book was a commentary. Meshivas Nefesh, it restores the soul. Verses continue. B'kudei Hashem Yisharim Misamchei Lev. The commandments of God, his words, are straight, are good, they gladden the heart. This verse could have been the title of my father's life. He found great joy in the principles of the Torah, in the foundations and the values of Jewish law, ethics, and commandments, and understood that by studying them, teaching them, and modeling them, he could enhance the lives of others. He understood that the words of God were straight, and that straightness was in itself a source of inspiration and light. And even when those principles were unpopular, and the culture of the time pushed in a different direction, he maintained that it was this very straightness that would shine through and lift others to the greatest height. And that, as the verse continues, Mitzvahs Hashem bara b'yiras einayim, the clear and pure commandments of God, put the sparkle in his eyes, and he could convey that to others. He would never compromise them or change them or present them as any less than they were, but place them before the world with his distinct mix of intelligence, insight, wide-ranging scholarship, humanity, and sensitivity. And what an impact he had. His first book is widely acclaimed as a classic, and it was groundbreaking. The notion of an English language book that quoted Rabbi Eger's and Achiezer's. Today it's not uncommon, but when he wrote this book, it was a trailblazer. And to do so with such style, such clarity, such depth, and such range, he impressed upon the world that B'kudei Hashem Yisharim something like Mitzvahs Hashem bara b'yiras einayim. It's appropriate that Daf Yomi is right now in the middle of Yevamos, leading people around the world to study this Talmudic tractate together. His book, which focused on a passage from that tractate, brought its study to people around the world of such a diverse nature and with such enduring impact that it deserves to be ranked within that company. But it was not only with such complex material that he made his mark. During the completion of that book, he realized that there may be just possibly some who might not be able to appreciate or understand the rabbinic universe in which his work functioned. Therefore, in what he called a blue streak of effort in a very short time, he added an introduction to give some context and background to the world of Jewish law. The introduction became a classic in its own right and has its own legacy. In the words of one renowned educator who wrote to me last night, quote, "It was and remains one of the very best introductions to the history, mechanics, and integrity of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition. It became the first address on the journey of so many in their Torah experience. I was assigned it as a reading and as a high school student. My wife studied it in high school, my brother did, and so did so many others. The verses we have mentioned also contains the phrase, Eidus Hashem Ne'amana, the testimony of God is faithful. He gave faithful testimony to God's word, often in the literal sense, traveling to Rome, to Washington, to Albany, all around the world, to present the clear, straight, and enlightening Pekudei Hashem to so many near and far, young and old, academic and unlearned alike. He would continue on this path to become a world-recognized expert on many topics, particularly in the realm of medical ethics, devoting himself passionately to defending the sanctity of life as God's greatest gift, ultimately putting his message to paper in his cherished final volume, entitled Where There's Life, which, in his last few weeks, guided us and held our hands, even when he was no longer able to talk to us directly. When he passed away on Friday morning, I was finishing davening Shacharis a few blocks away, with a particular intensity as the moment demanded. I found myself focusing particularly on the phrase, Vayivarech David es Hashem le'enei kol hakal, and David blessed God in front of the whole congregation. It struck me that this is what my father had done his entire life. He blessed God and his word in front of the whole world, his figurative congregation around the globe, and his more literal congregation at home. And that congregation was so very precious to him. He passionately believed in the rabbinate as a calling, as one of the noblest ways to spend a life. He could not understand how anyone would treat it otherwise. He considered its every challenge an opportunity, and its every demand a glorious mission. I somehow managed to grow up in a rabbinic home without realizing there was anything not to be loved about going into the rabbinate until it was too late. In this, and with all his life's work, he found the most magnificent partner in my mother. He looked long and hard to find the right one. And I and my siblings are eternally grateful to Allah for providing a venue for a Californian living in New York coming back from Israel to meet a woman from London. My mother perfectly matched his values, bringing the same purity of motive and devotion of spirit to the rabbinate, setting aside any personal needs to serve community and family with compassion, wisdom, modesty, and the same endless capacity to give, to care, and to love. If these last few months were hard on us, they were hardest on her. But she attended to all of my father's needs with both tenderness and tenacity, devotion and determination, whatever the moment needed. Together, they made it their highest priority to create a home for us that was nurturing and conducive to all of the values that they modeled as much as they taught. The home is meant to be a place of kindness, of giving and hospitality, learning and teaching. My father always made it clear how much he valued our Torah education. As a young child, when I would spend time on my many hobbies, he would gently ask me, Torah, not to hail that? And the Torah, what will be of that? As I got older, and others my age were earning money during the summer, he was a given that I would be learning during the summer. And even if it was a choice between a learning program that cost money and one that was free, his answer was clear: wherever you would learn better. Later on, when I published my own books, I was able to do so only because he tirelessly slaved over every word, checking its grammar and consistency, and saving me from many embarrassing mistakes. And as much as he loved learning, he read those pages because he loved me. And it was his boundless love for all of us that rose up even above all of his other incredible qualities. So that even while he was so many people's favorite rabbi, author, lecturer, husband, brother, son, grandfather, cousin, uncle, or nephew, none of that got in the way of his being an unparalleled, fantastic father. My father loved words, and he loved goodness, and he loved good words. He truly believed that Torah is Hashem Tamima, that God's perfect Torah restores the soul. The word Tamima can also connote innocence and simplicity, and he somehow managed to embody those qualities as well within a brilliant and scholarly mind. He was a model of humility and modesty, and at the same time he was able to graciously appreciate a compliment and take pride in the good things in which he was involved. He happily embraced all good words. My wife commented to me a number of times in these last few weeks when he was not fully communicating. Now, nonetheless, his pure needles, his personal qualities would continue to shine through, how he would continue to convey sensitivity and compassion even when he wasn't talking. In those weeks, his basic essence stayed the same, even when he was so physically limited. And he would come out in a few words that he was able to say. When doctors and nurses tried to get him to say how he was feeling, sometimes he was able to get out 2 words: Baruch Hashem. Whether or not they understood the language, he continued to bless God in front of every congregation he had, however small it was. The last clear word he said to me was a few days ago, when his basic attitude towards the life he lived, and the work he'd been involved in, and the family he was a part of, persevered through all of his pain. Daddy, I asked, how are you feeling? He managed to say one word, the standard response from easier times: wonderful. The Talmud teaches Ashrei Misha Balakam B'Talmudo Biyado. It is speaking of one who reaches the point of transition between this world and the next, and is able to bring with him his Talmud, his learning. The commentary of Rabbi Nachman notes, it is not a reference only to learning, but to learning that was realized by action, to good words that led to equally good deeds. But Daddy, how should we translate the first word of that passage? Ashrei. Some may translate it as happy. Maybe you would. Today, none of us here can use that word, but it can equally be translated as fortunate. And the good fortune that you always appreciated, even when it wasn't so obvious, is all of our good fortune. That your good words and your good deeds inspired us and taught us, directed us and comforted us, educated us and uplifted us. It's the endless good fortune you have left us with. When we seek to learn and to teach, to help and to care, to cherish life, truth, and the straight and enlightening words of God, and to raise our families in your model, it will be your magnificent legacy speaking. And it will mean that your beautiful soul will be together, bound in the bound of life. And as you put it in your book, that is everything.
Rabbi John lives in Feldman.
My father spent his lifetime teaching that human life is a precious gift from God to be protected and treasured. This idea is perhaps rooted in this week's Torah reading, where we see Yaakov, our forefather, foreseeing a potentially violent confrontation with Esau. The pasuk uses two different terms to describe the dread he was feeling. Rashi, always on alert for such textual redundancies, explains that the Torah is conveying that Yaakov feared not only for his own life and his loved ones, but equally feared the possibility that he would be forced to kill an enemy. This absolute reverence for all human life is a guiding principle in Jewish law and is a proud, enduring distinction of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. Dad was particularly taken with this concept and recognized the contribution he could make by shining a spotlight on it and sharing it with everyone. The world is a better place when life is treated with infinite respect. He wisely understood that the inviolate sanctity of life needed to be ever defended, even when the spirit of compassion might unfortunately dictate otherwise. The Talmud at the end of Mesechus Brachos records that even as Rabbi Akiva was being martyred at the cruel hands of the Romans, he was reciting the Shema, accepting upon himself God's majesty and the obligation to love God always. He admitted to his students that although he spent his lifetime teaching that love for God prevails even if God takes your life, he had always been distressed by the notion that he might himself fail to live up to that ideal if the time came. For Rabbi Akiva, the tragedy of his death was mitigated by the confirmation of his convictions. Similarly, Dad may have been troubled to preach about such a weighty topic with no real way to know if he could live up to his own beloved ideals. Would he have the requisite strength, if necessary, to suffer for his beliefs? Had he made sufficient impact on his family and community for them to make emotionally challenging and halachically complex decisions? As difficult as the recent months have sometimes been, there is indeed comfort in the fact that Dad was able to uphold his principles and enjoy the true dignity that can only come from honoring the infinite value of life. I must not go any further without expressing our profound gratitude to Mom, who steadfastly cared for Dad with unbelievable strength, tenderness, and wisdom. It was Mom's heroism that enabled Dad to spend his last days in relative comfort, surrounded by love and support. Adrian was a true godsend, helping Dad at home these past several weeks. Lillian has been a stalwart pillar of our household for over 3 decades. We thank you both tremendously. Mom, of course, used her trademark resourcefulness to assemble and deploy a wonderful team of doctors and healthcare professionals. Of course, where there's life was homework for all of them, which further served to enhance Dad's legacy. Mom was a fierce advocate for him throughout, and a perfect partner in this, as in every one of Dad's accomplishments throughout nearly 44 years of marriage. And that's not because Mom automatically agreed with everything Dad ever said. Perhaps that would have been easier. But no, it was rather out of immense devotion and respect. Dad lectured many times on the sanctity of life. How much more resonant is his message now? On a personal level, we are so grateful for the valiant fight that Dad gave. He afforded us precious months to show our love and honor for all he has done for us, and to see more deeply the tremendous pride and delight he took in his children and grandchildren. Daniel and Leah's children, Adina, Yaakov, Miriam, Shendel, and Tehillah, brightened his days with their adorable good cheer. I was deeply gladdened to be watching online with Dad as Daniel introduced Seder Nashim to the Daf Yomi community and dedicated his extremely impressive presentation to Dad. Rebecca and Tal provided the highlight of the year by introducing us to Alana Maya. Rachel and I hope that Simcha Malka, Esther, Yosef, and Moshe, their contributions have taught them even more about how to honor your parents. Honorable mention has to go to Malka for making so many cross-town shops to walk. How much more deeply we feel the impact Dad had on us now. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us that the world rests on the three pillars of Torah study, worship, and acts of kindness. These were really the only three things that Dad was about. He was blessed after a long international search to find a worthy companion and mom who shared these values. They were indeed the perfect couple, a perfect team, dedicating their lives to each other and to their common goal of serving the community. We were truly privileged to grow up in their home. As children, we bonded over Torah discussions, walks to shul, and visits to his beloved congregants. I'm not sure if that parenting method would work for everyone. But Dad, especially, was so heroic, magnetic, and dynamic that I felt like I was riding along with Batman. I would tag along to hospitals, and Lomadati Mimenu Shloshet Dvarim. Dad taught me, always take the stairs if possible. Time is too precious to spend it waiting for an elevator. I also learned Dad's theory that ice cream can make anyone feel better. And that visiting and checking on the sick is meaningful, even if they don't know you came. Dad loved to teach, like a matchmaker, introducing God's Torah to God's children. He relished and maximized every opportunity to enlighten and inspire people. His eloquent and insightful sermons from this very pulpit touched so many of us. Like his biblical namesake, Dad was a psalmist, using beautiful and masterful language to pay tribute to God. His command of the English language, Hebrew language, and 7 other languages were an impressive part of his formidable arsenal and was used for humor as well as inspiration. Even after a stroke cost him much of his verbal dexterity, he did not let pride stop him from giving public lectures and eulogies when needed. How much more inspiring his words became. Dad truly treasured the Chumash and leaned from the Torah with memorable enthusiasm that revealed real understanding and love for the text. His dramatic rendition of the 10 Commandments was the next best thing to being at Mount Sinai. Simcha, you made him so proud. What are you waiting at your bar mitzvah? Understandably, Dad always had an affinity for Rashi's commentary, which rewards careful, inquisitive reading of the text with profound lessons and insights. This past summer, our precious summer of 2014, whenever I would visit, the script would be the same. Do you want to rest? No. Do you want to watch TV? No. Do you want to learn the Parsha with Rashi? Oh, yes. How much more precious that learning was, especially when Esther and Adina joined in with us. Dad loved shul, praying for people and praying with people. He dedicated himself to this shul and this community, bringing solemnity on the high holidays and merriment on Purim and Simchas Torah. Whether it meant wearing a kittel on Yom Kippur or an endless assortment of silly hats on Purim, Dad helped people of all ages connect with shul. His intimate consciousness of God was evident to the end, always insisting on wearing yarmulke in the hospital and making blessings on food. How much more poignant that observance was. But above all, Dad was so kind. He had caring words and an infectious smile for everyone, including one last one on Friday I'll never forget. I remember Election Day, 1980, back in Bay Ridge. Dad had intended to vote for Ronald Reagan. Of course, busy as he always was, he didn't make it to the polls until almost 9. On the way, he heard on the car radio that President Carter had already conceded. So he voted for Carter. He said that the poor guy already lost. Let me give him one more vote. Now, most people would think that one vote out of hundreds of millions couldn't possibly brighten someone's day. But that was Dad. He never underestimated the power of a simple, kind gesture. In 1995, Dad was honored as Rabbi of the Year by the New York Board of Rabbis. Instead of acknowledging how well-deserved the recognition indeed was, he used the opportunity to tout the importance of giving people even undeserved compliments. He punctuated his rousing speech with a phrase from the book of Hosea, Ohavim nedava, I will love them willingly. Love and goodwill should be spread liberally. Appropriately, this phrase was read in yesterday's Haftarah. Even as Dad's vocabulary dwindled, every doctor and nurse and therapist and health aide and visitor heard Dad say things like, wonderful, much better, Baruch Hashem, and most of all, thank you. How much clearer it was how truly genuine was his kindness. Dad was directed towards Torah, Avodah, and Chesed, but the engine was fueled by his amazing intellect, energy, and motivation. When I saw the focus and determination with which Dad approached speech therapy after his stroke, I realized I was incredibly getting a glimpse of what kind of student Dad must have been, always eager to absorb and reach the next level. He was also very motivated to take walks, to exercise his feet, despite the pain that often forced him to stop. He would apologize to me for having to wait, saying, I just need a short pause. And then happily adding, but then I can go again. Always accentuating the positive. Now, it is we that have to take a short pause. Devastated by the pain of losing you. But we will go again. Not without you, but with you, forever in our hearts, guiding and inspiring everything that we do.
Back up there.
I look just like my mother and say, little Viva, which of course would make me smile, and they say, oh, there's your father. And you heard about his smile from both my brothers, and it was legendary. And it is what lifted the hearts of so many people. People who he was privileged to lead as a rabbi, people who worked with him, people who saw him in the street, anybody and everybody who crossed his path was lucky enough to be exposed to that beautiful smile. Everybody who worked with him, without exception, said it was the best experience of their life, that there was nobody like Rabbi Feldman. He was all goodness, as you heard. No hard edges, all giving. And he prided himself not just on his goodness, but on his creativity in manifesting and expressing that goodness. There was a man who wasn't even a member of his shul, but he suffered a major loss. His house caught fire and everything was destroyed. And my father went to go visit him. And he sat with him. And the man said, my house and my possessions I can live without, but there's one thing that just destroys me. I had these plaques of all these different organizations to which I donated my time and my money, and they too perished. My father went and he commissioned, I don't know how he did this, but he made one massive plaque of all of the different organizations and philanthropies to which he donated and presented it to him. It was that creativity, motivated not just by a sensitivity and a love and a warmth and that smile, but the humanity and the psychology, understanding what each person truly needed, what they were really missing. And that was the depth that he brought to his pastoral care. not just to the community, both in the shul and out, but as you heard also to his family. He was a consummately devoted son and brother to his 8 siblings. He had one sibling in particular who was also a rabbi, not quite as gifted as he was, and every Shabbos he was in need of a sermon. And my father, whom you may know, never wrote down his sermons, instead spent every Friday night agonizing over every line in his mind without writing it down. Still, every week, he sat down to write a sermon for his brother and made sure to get it in the mail. And at that time, the regular mailbox was not enough. He had to drive into New York City to take it to the special post office in the center of town just so it would get to his brother in time for Shabbos. And not even use that sermon. He would then go that Friday night and sit and agonize over his own sermon. That is consummate devotion. And again, with that humanity, understanding what each person needs on their own level. So accustomed to giving to others, I don't think it ever occurred to him to think about his own interests and taking care of himself, to conceive of his own personal happiness. I think that marriage for him and a family came as something as a surprise. Something as a bonus second act in his life that he was continuously awestruck by. He never took it for granted, and I felt that every day. It wasn't just love that he felt for us. He marveled at us. And it was that my father and I had a uniquely close relationship. You'll find that my husband is the shortest, and yet I think it will make my father just as happy. That was how unfair that relationship was. When I was a little girl, people asked me, how did you wrap your father around your finger? And I said, I didn't wrap my father around my finger. I just found him there and kept him there. And this is a relationship where when I was young and I used to jump on the bed and I broke the bed, it was my father who blamed the bed. He said, they don't make beds like they used to. But that close relationship stayed exactly the same even when I wasn't a little girl anymore. One of my favorite things in my adolescence until very recently was to get an email from him in all caps, an extremely formal but deeply warm style to give me encouragement during my many years of growth and struggle. If you permit me, I'd like to read one of his emails. Dear Reeves, your voice this afternoon sounded a bit sad. As difficult as your situation is, and as unsettling as your set of challenges might seem, you cannot lose sight of the extra special human being you are. Complete with charm and talent, strength of character, and beauty of personality. When you make the right connection, these qualities will enrich the microcosm and macrocosm of your universe in a blaze of euphoria for you and yours. I don't know what he was talking about. These qualities will again assert themselves, and everyone will recognize the power of Rebecca. The dross will subside and the gold will shine. Please be as patient and as sure of this as we are, who love you so much. I love these emails and loved my father's literary flair, but know that they also came at my mother's urging. She is amazing and supported and facilitated all that goodness. He didn't need to think of his needs because she was already there anticipating them. Just as he was to the community, she was to him. She understood exactly what he needed psychologically. For any husband to have a wife like my mother would be the luckiest. What a gift to find a woman like that. She gave his life a new meaning and gave him this second act. Remained so devoted and loving and nurturing of all his needs until the very end. I believe that she gave him life and she kept him alive. And I'm just so grateful that he lived long enough to see all those emails mean something. I think he saw the satisfaction of me finding love, of not the power of Rebecca, but the dross subsiding. I'm so grateful to God that he was zocheh to find an Ezer Kenegdo and to come to Jerusalem to dance at my wedding. And just 8 weeks ago, I had a baby girl that he got to meet, he got to hear about, and to bring her that joy, to bring him that joy and love. I cannot thank Hashem enough. He's a
Soloveitchik, Director of the Strauss Center at Yeshiva University, Rabbi of the Spanish-Portuguese Synagogue.
Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. So we are informed by Tanakh. The soul of man is the candle of God. The sentence, as you've heard so beautifully from his children, is an apt summary of Rabbi David Feldman's worldview. As one of the founding fathers of modern Jewish bioethics, he believed and eloquently argued that, to utilize the title of one of his books, that where there's life, there's life. That life is not to be valued because of its relative utility or monetary potential or possibility for achievement in a particular field. Rather, it is infinite and invaluable because it is a gift of God, because it is a Tselem Elokim, because the Ner Hashem is in Nishmas Adam, because the soul of every man is the candle of God. The truth is that when you ponder the phrase Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, you realize that this captures not only Rabbi Feldman's worldview, but also actually what it was like knowing him. It was over 2 decades now that I first became close friends with Rabbi Feldman's remarkable children. A friendship that has been such a privilege to my life. But it was only after I arrived at Yeshiva University and with my parents being in Chicago, they began bringing me to their home on East Lawn Drive for Shabbos after Shabbos. It was only then that I realized that knowing their parents, Rabbi Feldman and Rabbi Aviva Feldman, that knowing their parents would become a central part of the privilege of being friends with the Feldman family. And spending time with Rabbi Feldman became one of the very special Shabbos experiences that I had those teenage years. And, as anyone who saw him smile knew, he was a ner. He was a ner shel Shabbos in that home. He was a Shabbos light in that home, not just because of his smile, enlightening all with the radiance of his Torah, and suffusing the home with his warmth, brightening every conversation with his wit, with a humor that I would add that could be simultaneously so sharp and insightful without ever losing its kindness and its warmth. I was thinking about this over this Shabbos and about his life. And I was reminded of one of the central sugyos for Jewish ethics, one of the prime Talmudic passages in the field regarding which Rabbi Feldman had written so much. The Gemara describes 2 people wandering in the desert, one who has a canteen and one who does not. If the canteen is shared, neither will get enough water and neither will survive. If the one who has the water drinks it, then he and he alone can preserve his life and make it to an oasis. And so a debate emerges. A man by the name of Ben Petura offers what appears to be the idealistic approach. He says that one is obligated to share his canteen, even if it means that neither will survive. Whereas then the giant of Jewry, Rabbi Akiva, argues that no. Chayecha kodmen, that actually the Jewish belief in the sanctity of life allows one, perhaps even obligates one, to preserve his life, that the one who has the canteen can drink the water. Striking, because Rabbi Akiva is the one who establishes that v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself, is the central principle of the Torah. And it was Rabbi Feldman, in a comment that I quote all the time, who noted that even as Rabbi Akiva has gone on to lasting fame in Judaism, it was Ben Petura, the man who argues that you should share the canteen and not survive in the desert. Ben Petura advances this opinion that you should share and not survive in the desert. And then Ben Petura himself is never heard from in the Talmud again. It was a witty comment, but in truth, it and the sugya itself capture so much about him and his worldview. What made him such a perfect person to pioneer the field that he did is that he was able, as you heard so beautifully, to argue for the principles of Judaism and for the sanctity of human life for which Judaism stood. While at the same time he was a person like Rabbi Akiva, who placed love and halacha's concern for all, for v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, at the heart of his religious vision. And what made him so special as a rabbi and a bioethicist is what made him so singular in person, a source of enlightenment and radiance that made him a Ner Hashem in the lives of those who knew him, those who had the privilege to learn from him, and most of all, a Ner Hashem, a candle of God in the lives of those who loved him and those who were loved by him. Now that Ner Hashem, which burned so brightly in that home on Shabbos on East Lawn Drive for so many years, and that shone so beautifully in this synagogue, is being so mourned and so missed. But that does not mean that it is gone. It burns on brightly in his family, who are themselves living embodiments of his Torah, his wisdom, his warmth, and his wit. And the light that was his life still shines as well, but in another way. Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal the Rav once distinguished between the Neros Shabbos, the candles of Shabbos which were lit inside the home, and the lights of Hanukkah which we will light 2 weeks hence, and which were meant originally to be lit outside. The Shabbos candles are flames that are felt right in front of us. But Hanukkah, the Rav said, teaches us that lights can be seen differently, but as profoundly from a distance. As Rav Soloveitchik put it, the Shabbos candle is a Ner Hamor, a light that through proximity makes things visible to us. The Hanukkah candle is a Ner Hanira Mirachak, a light seen from afar. Like a star, it does not illumine up close, but it is still seen, and now in perhaps an even more profound way, because it serves as a beacon and a guide. So to my dear friends, I say that the Ner to whom you introduced me on Shabbos in your home so many years ago has now become a Ner Hanukkah and will be a pole star in the lives of all who loved him for many years to come. Yeh zichro baruch.
The family has asked me to read some letters from Rabbi Feldman's brother-in-law, Rabbi Fendel, and his nephew, Rabbi Fendel, who sent the letters from Israel. And in fact, this moment is being sent to Israel from where we are now. Ahava, love. Our Davy was the epitome of love. Love for everyone he encountered, for his congregants all over, and especially for his family, his children, father, brothers, and sisters, and especially his dear wife Aviva, his lifelong loyal helpmate. As Goldie, his sister, often said, he was a real tzaddik in his relationships with people. Bein Odom l'chaveru, in every sense of the word. He was a true tzaddik in his relationship with his father for so many years. He was a pillar for our family. He was always called upon for his advice in every matter. He actively cared for and supported others, bringing out goodness and happiness in everyone around him. He was blessed with a sweet and good disposition, always ready with a special smile, mixed with wise words. He helped so many people in times of need, helped them face life's challenges, and especially those related to medicine, with humor and strength. He and Goldie were an inseparable duo, not only siblings, but also best friends through thick and thin. How we will miss his wonderful sense of humor, his beautiful way of listening, his wonderful smile, the love, care, and concern he exhibited with all of us. How proud we were of his achievements as a scholar par excellence. When his first book appeared, it was heralded and lauded as the best halachic work in English, providing fascinating analyses, not only of the specific topics, but on the entire halachic transmission process. This was a classic presentation used by many, including in our family, as a primer on the halachic process. As a congregational rabbi, he was beloved by the two large communities that he served for over 2 decades each, and by everyone else with whom he came in contact. I can only conclude with this quote from the Gemara, in the belief that it appears to have been written exclusively for our David. An elovin ve'enon olvin, shomim cherpason ve'enon meshivim, osim me'avo u'smechem b'yisurim, aleim ha'kosov omer, ve'ohavov, k'tzeis ha'shemesh b'guroso. Second letter was from Rabbi Feldman, who's the Rosh Yeshiva and founder of the yeshiva at Sderot, who writes as follows. For all of us in the Fendel family, Uncle Davy was always filled with love and life. He was our mother's best friend and example. He was the epitome of Kibbud Horim and Redifat Shalom, pursuing peace, and was a living example of a real love of learning. My mother always referred to him as a real tzaddik, and we were able to feel how much she admired and loved him. He was the uniting and strong force of good and chesed. How he cared for each brother and sister is legendary, alongside with his love and respect to his wife and children. Just a few weeks ago, I gave a class based on Uncle Davy's scholarly work, and once again I saw what an awesome Talmud Chacham he was. There is so much more to remember and to emulate, and all these merits are with him in the Olam HaEmes, in the world of truth. Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be for a blessing. Family also wanted me to thank, first of all, the doctors and nurses who not only provided so well for Rabbi Feldman's medical care, but were also sensitive to his values and dignity. Special thanks to Rabbi Dr. Edward Reichman, a cherished colleague of Rabbi Feldman, who spent long hours assisting, advising, and implementing Rabbi Feldman's principles medical care. He wrote in a letter that he sent to the family, Rabbi Feldman was a role model to me and had and will continue to have a profound impact on my learning and life pursuit. His gentleness, wisdom, balance, and kindness will forever be etched in my memory. Third, family wants me to thank Rabbi Rothwax for his above and beyond assistance at this time. Finally, we are thankful for the assistance and support of so many wonderful people from the Teaneck Jewish Center, Ora Sadia, Beth Aaron, Young Israel of Teaneck, Beth Abraham, and the entire Teaneck community. Just before we begin the Kel Moed, we wanted to call for a chapter of Tehillim upon Rabbi Pinchas Weinberger,